Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the LFC Transfer Room. My name is Lewis, and we're back with another episode of the Expert Analysis Series, the show we bring on YouTube and football's top content creators and get their thoughts on all things Liverpool football and everything in between. And today, we're joined by one of the best up-and-coming football podcasts out there, two lads who funny, have a good time. It is the Board Draw podcast, QPR supporter and Arsenal supporters, both on here with me today to discuss all things Arsenal, QPR, Liverpool. Thank you for coming on, guys. All good?
Yeah, no problem at all. Really looking forward to it. It's nice. We're on the LFC transfer room. Can't wait to get started.
Yeah, buzzing. Arsenal, Liverpool got a title challenge. We just got to deal with Man City, but we'll get there. We'll talk about that
I
later.
thought you were about to say we've got to deal with some QPR ramble for a bit.
Well, no, it's to be honest. I mean, the fact that you mentioned QPR at the end, I think is the most perfect way to go into it because I'm very fascinated by your podcast. Is very you connect to a wider fan base because I think you're obviously one club in the Championship, one club in the Premier League, and you seem to have a very sort of level-headed approach to all clubs, depending on what division they're on. Like it doesn't seem to matter. Whereas myself as a Liverpool fan, I'm very Premier League orientated. What's it like having your club in the Championship? Is there anything about that division that's somewhat better than the Premier League, or is it just very much the dream is just to get back and be out of it as quick as possible?
It's a really weird situation.
That's a good question, though.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question.
He always goes on, "Oh, Championship is the best league in the world," and I hear it, but
it's. I mean, you go through the Championship, and you'll probably ask a lot of Leicester fans this, and they'll say to you that the minute they went down from the Premier League, they've had the most exciting season since their title and their FA Cup and their challenges for the Champions League and whatever. Because dropping down that tier and being able to challenge, and you're winning week in, week out, you're going to see good football. It's brilliant. And then you get back to the Premier League and it's just hard again. It's really hard. Like you've got there, but it's not always as good as you think it's going to be.
Well, it's like Burnley, isn't it? Like they've come up flying, but they are finding it hard.
But it's the bit of the catch with the Championship because the league is so entertaining.
Yeah.
No VAR, which is brilliant. And although VAR, I think, will make its way into the Championship, it's quite refreshing to be able to see that. And you see so many different styles of play in the Championship. However, as a QPR fan, it's not all been plain sailing. We've had quite the rocky road since our relegation. I think we're like the fourth longest stint in the Championship at the minute. I think Birmingham have been there for like 13 seasons. We've been there about 8 or 9. And yeah, I mean, we were in October 2023, I want to say, we were challenging for the title. I mean, it was only a few months into the season, but we were top of the league, and it switched like that. Like, honestly, we got rid of Mickey Beale against our will, and then we made maybe the worst decision in the club's recent history, and maybe went a bit heart over head, and appointed Gareth Ainsworth. It was a rocky tumble down. I mean, I think we won one game with him in charge over the course of the rest of the season. It was so poor. But now we've got Martí Cifuentes back, and we've seen actual real good football. And I think if we can manage to stay up this season, big if, but we might do things next season. We might be a playoff contender. Maybe it's a big switch, but that's the nature of the Championship. You can go from being, right at the bottom, rock bottom of the league, to challenging for the players. I mean, look at what Ipswich have done coming from League One, and they've absolutely set the Championship alight. It's such an amazing league, and I think being able to have that broader perspective on sort of football in general, it's quite easy. I think if you're like a top 6 fan to not see like the bigger leagues. Like I'm looking at League One, League Two, and you can see what football means to like those clubs. And a lot of times, like maybe that gets lost when you're talking about £150 million transfers.
Facts, yeah.
I mean, is that something that you think's missing in modern football media? Like, you turn on Sky Sports, for example, and everything is just Premier League, Premier League, Premier League. I mean, do you think there is a big void in information coming from those lower leagues from mainstream media sources?
I mean, Sky have a monopoly on sort of the lower leagues, and as a QPR fan who can't always get to the games, it's difficult for me to. I mean, I can't even watch like half the games because unless you're playing a Leicester or a Leeds or someone like that, or it's a random Friday night game and you've been moved to that fixture, you never really get to see your team play on TV.
Yeah.
I think the coverage of it's fine, and like you say, there's such a broad like array of content creators. Every club's got content creators who highlight their daily like ins and out of the club, and it's brilliant. That's almost where you get all your information from now. It's half the time I'm seeing it coming from other content creators and seeing their opinions on things. So the sort of the general media around it is fine. I think you're seeing a bigger growth in lower league content creators, which is fantastic. But maybe from like the bigger corporations, it might leave us a bit to be desired, because you see a lot of the games that are on TV and you're like, surely you could whack a championship fixture on here and there.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that's fair enough. Like I said, I think your podcast is so like appealing to an audience because, like I said, the dynamics brilliant, having the Premier League and Championship working together. I mean, what's that like with regards to behind the scenes? Like, is there a lot of good-natured ribbon, or is it just very much a sort of, you're not my sort of, your team doesn't really concern me, just, to your own kind of thing?
Oh, you know what's funny? Arsenal played QPR yesterday in a behind closed doors friendly, and we lost 4-0. So,
I saw that.
Yeah, there is like banter between us, but I think he knows that I think I'm the more biased of the two. I lose my head a bit more. So he's always good at kind of shooting me down, keeping me level headed.
It's good because I get to play that sort of like devil's advocate, without having to be just doing it for the sake of it. Like for me, when we talk about Arsenal a lot, funnily enough, because I mean they're flying,
the best team in the country right now,
and so it'd be quite easy. Yeah, it can be quite easy for us just to sort of get carried away, and it's no fault of his own. He's obviously passionate about the club. And for me, it makes it easy for me to just chime in and play that devil's advocate and look at it from maybe a wider perspective and maybe a slightly less biased perspective, but it makes the dynamic work really well, I think.
No, 100%, especially as well. Luke was mentioning about when QPR were top of the league about a year and a half ago. There was this weird point in the podcast where Arsenal were top of the league and QPR were top of the league, and we were both flying high. The podcast, the vibes were so good. We were both like, oh yeah, teams won again, happy days. And then obviously Arsenal bottled the run in and QPR have kind of tumbled down the Championship. So we both had like
the highs and
lows of our team just kind of slowly dropping down. But
Definitely.
Yeah, it's been good.
Perfectly planned that. That was perfectly timed. I mean, like, just to go with the Championship, like you mentioned before how teams can be top. They can be rocking the whole league and then suddenly they can plummet just on snap of a finger. Pound for pound, where does the Championship rank for you in European football in terms of, there's like the top 5 leagues, for example, but where does the Championship rank amongst those teams for how good the quality is of the league?
I think you've got to look at the Championship just within itself to begin with. You see teams like Leicester, Leeds, Southampton, only Ipswich really in there, giving them a challenge for that top 2. And it's all just to do with the gap between the Championship and the Premier League. Like you see like the freak results where Coventry go and do Wolves in the FA Cup, but you can only take so much from that. I think stylistically, some of the teams in the Championship play unbelievable football, and it's difficult to sort of get a measure on how that ranks in the sort of like European football as a whole. I think a lot of European leagues they're very heavy weighted, so you've got your PSGs. You've got your sort of your Barcelonas, your Real Madrid, your Atleticos. You've got in Portugal, you've got Porto, Lisbon, and you've got like all these sort of big clubs. And then lower down that table, you probably see where Championship clubs would easily fit in. But yeah, I don't think we're quite at the point where the Championship could be making a claim for being stronger than any of the top leagues in most of the
it's a weird one with the Championship though, isn't it? Because like you said, the teams that drop down to the Championship that are big Prem clubs like Leeds, like Southampton, like Leicester, they're obviously too big for the Championship is probably excessive, but they are. And like in the Championship, you've got this situation where there's like almost like 3 leagues within one. You've got the big dogs, then you've got like the QPRs and that have stayed in the Championship for a long time, and then you've got the teams that are trying to come up into the Championship. So you've got like such a massive
you just got a range of like levels, really. I mean, you see teams like Rotherham who've come up after doing really well in League One, and they've been in and around the Championship. They've been in the Championship, out of the Championship sort of every other season. But this season, I think they sat on 19 points after like 36 games or 37 games. And there's poor teams in the Championship. I mean, QPR have hardly won a game all season. Sheffield Wednesday, they had horrific times with their owner, and they've had manager in, manager out, and it's crazy to see that even Rotherham can't even compete with the likes of us.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got that massive disparity, but even with the championship. The championship, like you say, is almost built into 3 leagues. It's like 3 leagues built in one. But yeah, the broader picture of where the championship ranks in European football, it's definitely probably a top 10 league in European football. But I don't know. It's difficult to say because you see still a lot of like Serie A clubs, Bundesliga clubs playing in like the Europa League, who are like almost lesser known clubs. You've got Polish teams and Belgian teams as well. So the standard is ridiculously high in Europe, and we know that as well. But yeah, the championship, it's got some fantastic clubs in it. It's just it's hard to sort of make that direct correlation, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose what I meant more is it's an incredible league in terms of the wide range of teams that are in it are all incredibly talented. But like you said, I've never thought of it in that way, that being that there is 3 sort of tabled in there. You know, the teams that are battling your relegation who might not be good enough, the teams that are consistent, like I said, QPR, Blackburn have sort of become one of those teams recently. And then having those ones that are too good for it's a really interesting way of looking at it. And I suppose in a sense it could be similar to the Premier League where
100%. That's what I was going to say.
you've got your teams at the top. Yeah, you've got your mid-table teams like your Palaces who are going to stay there, and then your teams like your Burnleys and Sheffields.
100%.
From an Arsenal perspective, what's it like suddenly going back to that peak point of the Premier League rather than sort of competing to get into that top 4 gap after a few years of uncertainty?
So good. It feels so good. I was like, I see so many tweets these days where people are like, oh, kids are going into school, Arsenal fans, and they get to like brag about Saka, brag about Saliba, brag about Declan Rice. And then like I had to go to school and defend like Squillaci or Coquelin or someone like that. So it's one of those things now where like I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch and all that jazz, but like times are good. Like the last kind of end of Wenger's time, even though we won a few FA Cups, like the vibe was just negative. Like you'd go into games and you'd be worried about like, I don't know, coming out of the game and fans are going to lose their heads. And that still happens. Arsenal fans are a bit mental, but the vibe around the club is just so much more positive. Everyone kind of, it's just nice to like be able to look at your players and be like, you're sick, you're sick, you're sick. Whereas like there was a lot of times where you kind of just look at the team and you're like, how are we going to get a result here?
It was almost like a point where it was like how many game weeks into Arsenal do an Arsenal thing and it becomes a banter like club again.
Yeah, everyone just comes with that, Arsenal have got a soft underbelly. And like maybe we did. But now that soft underbelly is hardened. We've got a hardened underbelly now.
You've got so much depth as well. Like I forget, like you've got players like Trossard who come on. You've still got Martinelli, Reece Nelson. Like you've almost sort of come from nowhere, but it's clear that Arteta had this long-term plan in place, and he's been planting the seeds since the day he came in.
Yeah.
What was the moment where you looked at the team and thought, "There's something really happening here," and you were convinced that this team was heading in the right direction under Arteta?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's been multiple different points. Like, obviously, when he first arrived and we got that FA Cup win, and everybody was kind of saying that like brought Arteta a lot of time, and it did, obviously. But like if you watch that game against Man City, which was the semi, the football we were playing was outrageous. We scored like one of the best goals I've ever seen at Arsenal, where we like build it up from the back, and then it goes up the right hand side, long diagonal to Aubameyang, who finishes it. So you could see from early that Arteta is building something. Like, I think a lot of people say that like a manager coming in that's like new and unproven, all you want to see is a style of play, like an identity. And Arteta did that immediately. So I think that game against Man City, and then obviously the result against Chelsea in the final, I think from that moment, I knew that like he wasn't going to just be a bit of a throwaway manager. I knew like from then that he had a plan, and like give him time. And then obviously you had like the issue at Arsenal where like the owners were public enemy number one. Everybody wanted them out. And so the worry was we've got this potentially great manager, but he's not going to get backed by the owners. It's going to be a bit of a mess. We had some backroom issues as well. And so we were worried that like something was going to go wrong. But the fact that the board has kind of had a refresh, Edu's come in, he's looking good. The owners, Stan Kroenke's taken like a step back, and his son Josh Kroenke's taken more of a hands-on approach. So I think it's a culmination of Arteta coming in and immediately stamping his authority with an identity and stuff.
Mm.
And the kind of like the ownership, the back room, and like the fans all coming together at the same time has kind of just led to like a really good moment for Arsenal, which has been built on in the last couple of seasons.
Difficult. It's almost difficult to remember like just how bloated a team Arsenal were as well. Like you had so many big names, you had so many big players on big wages.
Yeah,
and
stupid
Arteta,
money.
he's sort of similar to what Ten Hag done with Ronaldo. With like, Aubameyang, he said like, you're not having it your way.
Yeah.
We're building a team here. It's not about the individuals. And I think that's also always like a bit of an overlooked part of Arteta's tenure at Arsenal is just how he's sort of cultivated just a really healthy environment around the club,
Yeah.
which is it's really hard to do. Like we see managers go in and out of loads of teams, looking probably at Pochettino at Chelsea now. It's really hard to turn around what has been for a long time a really toxic environment.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, no, it's amazing to see what Arsenal are doing now, and Arteta is definitely the source of all the good things coming from Arsenal.
Well, you mentioned there that Arteta, even in that Chelsea game in the final, that you thought then, or there is signs of something. What was it like when he went through that bad spell at the start of, was it the 1920 season or the 2021, and like he lost like quite a few, City,
like,
Chelsea, and then I think
three.
yeah. I mean, at any point was that like, oh, maybe this isn't the man for us?
Yeah, well, like, it's hard not to think that, isn't it? If you're like 8 on the spin without a win, and you're Arsenal, like never been relegated from the Premier League, and you're like 19th in the league, and like the football you can still see there's patterns of play, but the players aren't doing it. Like Aubameyang's not pulling his weight. I don't know. We signed Willian, he's not pulling his weight. So it's hard not to think, is he the right guy? And I think I was kind of like wavering, whereas like, maybe it is time for a change. But I think at that point, there was just like not enough managers on the market that I could see that were worth like changing for. So I think for me, I was kind of always just like a stick there. It'll get better kind of vibe. And then obviously we got that result kind of, I think maybe it was Boxing Day against Chelsea where he brought the kids in. And I think that was a massive turning point. So we were playing Willian, playing Aubameyang, playing Lacazette. And then in that game, he brought Smith Rowe in, he brought Saka in, I think Nelson played a bit and Nketiah played a bit. And you see that he started to kind of realize that the vibe at the club had to change. The players that were on big money, not pulling their weight, had to go. And I think that was a kind of crossroads for him where he's like, either I stick by the Aubameyangs, the Lacazettes and the David Luiz, or I put all my time into these unproven kids and try and get them to the level. And I think it paid off taking the risk, because it was a risk to sack off your club's highest earner.
Yeah.
I mean, season before he was top goal scorer.
Yeah, he was the one carrying Arsenal on his shoulders. I think it's you asked the question like sort of why was he given that amount of like time, sort of like those 8 games without a win. But we need to remember Arsenal weren't fighting for titles before that. Arsenal hadn't had a Champions League appearance in however many seasons. I mean, you had your Europa League appearances and whatnot, but you weren't really any real force in the Premier League apart from being sort of standard-old Arsenal. So I think fans at the time saw the bigger picture, and maybe it's a bit of credit due at Arsenal fans, because a lot of clubs would have immediately pulled the trigger and got rid of him after 8 without a win. But yeah, he clearly has learned from the school of Pep, and maybe it is something that is a little bit overspoken about, because he's clearly his own manager. He does things differently, although he's brought in a couple of the personnel that he had at Man City. He's clearly just such a good manager. Like, you see how the players talk about him, how he talks about the club itself. He doesn't see the club as the owners and the fans and the players being separate entities. It's all one. They're all one Arsenal. I think you look at just how the atmosphere has changed. I know that comes with winning games and challenging for titles and things, but you just look at how the atmosphere changes when you put players on the pitch who are willing to play for the team, who really look at, like, you've got if Real Madrid came in for Saka tomorrow, I don't think he would want to leave. They could offer him a crazy contract. I don't think he'd want to leave. Declan Rice the same. He'd go play in probably the most star-studded team in the world, and I don't think he'd want to leave. And he's only been there like less than a season.
Well, you see, like the Declan Rice situation is a perfect example. Like, Pep wanted him at City. City put a bid in, but from whatever Mikel Arteta was saying to him, he was clearly conveying a attractive project and seemed to win Declan Rice round. So yeah, like you said, whatever Arteta's saying to people, like it seems to get people to buy in, and that's the most important thing as a manager, just to get people to buy into what you're putting out there.
Definitely. I think you're absolutely spot on. And to be honest, like from all the things we've seen of behind the scenes of Arsenal, you mentioned the harmony before, the way everyone works together. I know it's been a few years now, but like that All or Nothing documentary, you can see that, and that was early on. Like he's clearly a very talented manager. And I mean, is there a sort of sense of, because it was his first big job, it's like his first job in management, that he's gone in without a fear because he's never had to experience failure before?
Yeah, I think maybe that, and also I think it's you automatically get maybe an extra kind of few bad games from the fans if you're one of their own. So like you see, I don't know, like Frank Lampard when he had a bad stint at Chelsea, the fans will stick by you because you're one of their players. So I think that helped him through tricky periods as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think if it wasn't just the sake of signing Mikel Arteta as a manager for who he was, it's because he knew the club. He spent some of the best years of his career at the club. And like you say, that sometimes is, you see it within football as well. Like a lot of clubs will go out, like Lampard at Chelsea, they go out and it gets the fans on side, and thinking maybe that boost from the fans trying to back one of their own to succeed will help them, and it'll sort of relay on the pitch, won't it? And I think that plays a part. I definitely think it is. It's so much easier to connect with a manager who knows what it's like to support the club.
Yeah, 100%. It snowballs, doesn't it? Like if his first is kind of blind kind of backing of them, but then if they're a good manager, it will snowball. Like the blind backing becomes non-blind backing because they're playing good football and stuff starts 100%. Going well.
And I think as well, like I just referred to it, him coming as sort of one of the pupils of Pep. And I think that we know how well respected Pep is in the world of football. Like you can't really work with him and not know anything about the game. We knew he was going to be really good. And we talk about this quite a lot, how slower midfield players who sort of analyze the game throughout their career, they've not always been the fastest players, they've not always been the strongest players, but the ones who can sort of sit back and analyze the game, you're looking at someone like someone like Xabi Alonso as well.
Yeah,
they have just that little bit extra, that they've got that really ingenious football brain. And I think you knew that from his time as a player. His step into management sort of made sense. And it's just been, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. And it'd be easy to forget that looking at where Arsenal are now. But he's clearly, Arsenal fans are reaping the rewards for their faith in him, putting their faith in him. So yeah.
Yeah, Arsenal have been absolutely fantastic the past 2 seasons, and I like to think I'm a fan who's I suppose what's the right word? I'm very level-headed with my support of Liverpool, because if another club's doing really well, I like to give them praise. And I think Arsenal, the football you've been playing the past 2 years has been incredible. What about this season? I know obviously Declan Rice has come in and you've made very smart signings, but what's so different about this season that's got you possibly more prepared for a title run-in than last season?
That's a good question. I think that is like the $1 million question.
It's got to be, well, you've experienced it.
I think that is the crux of it, isn't it? Last season, everyone apart from Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko had never been in a title race. They're all kind of I think we had the youngest squad in the season last year.
Where did you finish the season before last? I can't remember. Was it
fourth?
Fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to see,
fifth.
It wasn't Champions League.
No,
so
fifth,
even to go from sort of battling for Champions League, I think Spurs picked you to the post, didn't they? To go from battling for Champions League to leading Man City in a title race is such a ginormous step. It's crazy. And I think if Arsenal had gone on to win the league last season, it would have been one of the most remarkable feats in football history, because Man City have been so dominant. I mean, they're fortunate that Liverpool sort of had a fall off season maybe, but it's crazy. The step up in mentality is insane. And you can only be better at winning titles by putting yourself in positions to win titles.
Yeah, 100%.
And that was really the first time you've been in that situation since however long. It's been a ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, like you said, the first time we'd ever been in a title race as a squad. So I think the pressure did get to them. Also, the Saliba injury was a nightmare. We didn't have good enough depth to deal with that. Now, I think if we lose Saliba, it's still a problem, but you'd hope that maybe Ben White comes in and we've got Tomiyasu at a fullback. So hopefully we'd be covered. So I think it's a combination of, now we've been in the title race and lost. You'd think that'd spur the boys on. Obviously, Declan Rice is huge. Depth's better. And I think, Arteta, I think tactic-wise, he's got more plans now. I think last season it was plan A, just play, outscore teams. But now we can defensively best team in the league, also best attacking numbers in the league. So I think he's got more strings to his bow this season. And I think that's probably with the extra players. Trossard, great signing. I think Jorginho's come in, great signing. Obviously, Declan Rice is crazy. Kai Havertz, who I'm assuming we're going to talk about at some point.
Yes, absolutely.
He offers a lot in terms of being able to be versatile and gives Arteta, like I said, more than one plan.
It's a different. He offers, without talking about him too much, but he offers you just a different way of going about unlocking teams, doesn't he? Than before, when you had sort of Gabriel Jesus being the main attacking outlet, and then when his injury occurred, you had Nketiah, who sort of plays in a similar way, maybe not as good as in the link up or build up play, but would be around the box area. He's a whole different beast, Kai Havertz, and something I guess we'll get onto.
Yeah, well, I mean, just before we go on to him, you mentioned there, like, Eddie Nketiah and Reece Nelson and players like that, and it's so mental to me that you've gone from the days of having Shamak, Bentner, to suddenly a point where your worst attacker arguably is Eddie Nketiah, who's scoring hat-tricks against Sheffield. Like, it's mental how far you've come in that regard. And you mentioned Havertz. With Liverpool last season, we saw that Darwin Núñez is a very direct, he likes to get in behind kind of player. But we had Firmino, who was on the bench, who offered a very different role, a false nine, creating space for everyone else. Havertz is that for you. And I mean, when he came in, where was the initial position that you thought he was going to play? And has Arteta done what you thought he was going to do with him?
That is a good question. So I think I said left 8 was where he was going to play. Obviously, Xhaka leaving, I thought he was going to be kind of a replacement for Xhaka. And I think at the start of the season, he definitely tried that with Havertz in the left 8. But I think pretty quickly realised that didn't work. And now we're seeing his best games, his best recent patch of form has come playing through the middle. Obviously, it helps that Jesus has been injured and so he's had to play through the middle. But I think his best position is through the middle.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I mean, you look back at his Leverkusen days where he scored however many goals. It was like 20-something goals in a season.
He was a shadow striker.
And
kind of player,
shadow striker. But he always had, you can tell when he gets in and around the box, he's just such a confidence player. Like when it's flowing and like recently, he doesn't second guess himself. And the game looks so much more natural when it's played around him.
But when his confidence is low.
I mean, you've seen pretty much for his entire career, maybe apart from a few appearances where he just looked like he was a square peg in a round hole. Like he was there and he was always a threat because, I mean, he's a tall player. He's physical, he's tall, and you know what he's about. Like you think, God, he might get on the score sheet today.
Yeah.
But
and
I think
Arteta said he's got a good footballing brain, so he will always be in the right places.
Yeah.
So I think that's why at Chelsea he did okay, but never really hit his heights of Leverkusen because Chelsea never really played a system that suited him. And I'm not saying we are currently playing a system that suits him, but we're playing him a little bit closer to a system that suits him.
100%.
So I think he's starting to get his flow.
I think as well, like, so at the beginning of this season, where before you even signed him, I think one of the initial plans was to test out Emil Smith-Rowe as that left 8. But obviously he's had a sort of injury hit season, which is a shame because we saw what he could do.
Yeah.
He's an absolutely outstanding player, and we hope he gets back to that sort of level. But I think the Xhaka departure left a big hole to be filled, and maybe it's the one that you hadn't filled even to now.
Yeah,
because Xhaka, I mean, the amount of work he done, he would always be on the edge of the box. No matter if the build-up started and it was a long diagonal ball across and a split defense open, he would always end up on the edge.
You see
of
the
box.
numbers he's putting up in Bundesliga at the moment. He's like one of the best midfielders in the league. Yeah.
And maybe that's a scary thing to think because if Arsenal can find someone to replace Xhaka, then just how far can they go?
I mean, Luke, I just wanted to get your thoughts on, you mentioned Xhaka there, and being a fan from, obviously you've got no bias in the matter, you've got no reason to think this, but when Xhaka had the incident against, I believe it was Crystal Palace for Arsenal, and he threw the shirt off and he was, given all the big one, did you think there was ever a way for him back into that team?
Oh, you'd be silly to think so, wouldn't you? I mean, we do love a redemption arc. I'm all for like the Harry Maguire redemption arc at Man United, but to really go out and altercate with the fans,
It's crazy.
I mean, because he was captain at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You look at it as a fan, maybe from another club, and you're almost like typical Arsenal falling
Laughable,
apart again. Yeah, when's the next scandal happening? But to do such a thing means you care. Like, you rarely would act in a way like that, where if you didn't care, you were just there for a paycheck. You were just taking the abuse and gone home and played FIFA or something, you know.
Good point.
But to go and have an actual altercation with the fans, be screaming and shouting, throw your shirt down. No, I didn't think there was a way back. But I think it just that is almost the Arsenal sort of genetics. The DNA is that they have this intoxicating way of making players fall in love with their club. Like, I think a lot of players, maybe they go to like Chelsea, even Man United of late, and they don't really understand what it means to play for a big club. But people come and they play for Arsenal, and maybe that's going back to Arteta. Maybe that's all down to him and Edu, because they've only bought in players that want to play for the club. But it's 100% hit rate, isn't it? I mean, you look at Kai Havertz now. He's in love with Arsenal. They infect their players with this love for them, and yeah, it's an amazing thing to see. I mean, the fact that he came back and then had the season he had last season, it's outrageous. And yeah, I don't know. It's great man management, and I think it's players falling in love with the club.
I love it when Luke gasses up Arsenal.
Very, very few, far and far between.
I was going to say, is that a common occurrence, or is that just something special for today?
No, something special for today, I think. Normally I'm on cloud 9 and he's like, Ross, calm down, mate.
Yeah, I've got to play I've got to bring you back down to earth at some point.
Hey, stop at the league. You can get carried away. It's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah, but for how long?
Oh.
I don't think I could stand it.
Right,
I don't think I could stand it if he was gloating the whole time.
I mean, that does go into the next thing. I mean, from your perspective, and from my perspective, and it's not an offensive thing to Arsenal, but I look at it as, if you can get above City, that's it. You've done it. And I think that's just because we've been hurt so many times over the past few years. It's going to happen. But from 100%. Arsenal's perspective, is City your main rival? Like, how are we viewed through the perspective of Gunners' eyes?
I don't know if it's all Gunners, but for me specifically, I've said to Luke many times, I'm more worried about City than you guys. And that's dig on you guys. After last season, when you're ahead of City, and we were ahead by even more than this season, we were ahead by 8 points at one point. And they still caught us. So I'm more scared of City. Like we say on the podcast all the time, City from March till May, well, even like a little bit before March, they just don't lose a game. So my fear is City. Why am I not so worried about Liverpool? I don't really know. I think, and I don't know if you feel the same, maybe, like, obviously you're in the title race and you could win it 100%. And there's a lot of things I do like about this Liverpool side. But like, as a non-Liverpool fan looking in, I can't think of many games where I'm like, you absolutely battered this team. Whereas like with Arsenal, that's for the past couple of months, that's all we've been doing. City, obviously, that's all they ever do. So I think that's maybe why I'm a bit more relaxed about Liverpool.
For me, City and Arsenal are the two front runners for me.
But that's not what Opta says. We do this thing on the podcast where we check like the Opta standings for like the rest of the season, who they predict. And it's always Man City and Liverpool quite close. I think like 45% for City, 35% for Liverpool, and then like 10% for Arsenal. And I always think that's a little bit rude.
I think like it's really hard to say, because Liverpool are the fighter team. Like they're the ones who go out, and even if they're 1-0 down in the 90th minute, you think they might come back. Like Arsenal and Man City are never really in that position. They strangle teams. I mean, you look at Arsenal, I think they've kept some, without being like a weirdo analytic guy, but they've kept some of the lowest XGs against in like football in history. They absolutely choke teams to death, and it's amazing to watch. And City do the same thing. And City haven't clicked as well as we thought they would this season. But for me, Liverpool are a weird one. I look at the squad and I still think it's quite incomplete. I think the main one going into the season was that 6th role, Fabinho leaving, Endo being the sort of temporary solution, and I think he's been an outstanding player this season. Maybe the most underrated signing of the season. and he's stepped up in big games.
Yeah.
He's been so consistent. But I look at that Liverpool team and I think, you know, Man City, they're bringing off Doku off the bench. They're bringing, you know, in their midfield, they get Kovacic in. They've got such a plethora of depth. And Liverpool is still, and not to discredit them, but like Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, we're seeing their lack of depth is such an injury-stricken run. No Alisson, no Trent, no Szoboszlai for a long time, no Jota. The fullback is harder. It's harder to bring on.
Like in that Chelsea game, they had to bring the kids on, and obviously that still worked. The kids at Liverpool are quality, but like the fact that you're bringing on players for their first ever Premier League appearance.
But the best managers to have when doing that is Jurgen Klopp, and I think if Liverpool go on to do it and win the league, it'll just be the Klopp factor. I mean, he is outrageous, and like you said, you've struggled to think of a game where Liverpool have really like dominated the team, and I can think of quite a few where Liverpool have won the game by a margin of 3, 4, 5 goals.
Yeah,
but
still conceding chances.
But it's still conceding those chances.
Yeah.
I mean, which is weird to say because Liverpool, I think, had the second best defense in the league.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something about Liverpool that I really want to see the complete picture. But that midfield trio, although it's starting to kick into gear now, I'm not sure it's balanced enough for me. I'm not sure it's balanced enough, but for me, I think Arsenal are heavy favourites for the title.
I mean, the more it goes on, I am starting to sway that Arsenal do have maybe a better chance than us. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that on here, but
so bad though.
Yeah, I was going to go with that. I mean, what do you make of the run-in? Like, is there any particular ones that you're apprehensive towards in particular, or?
Well, let's start with the one as we come back. Man City away is going to be. I think that is. I said this on the podcast. That is going to be like pretty much the barometer. If we go to the Etihad and win, I don't see why we can't win the whole thing. But if we go to the Etihad, get turned over like 4-5-1, like we have done recently, it's Man City's title, and I won't hear anything about it.
Even if you put up a good, if you dominate City for 90 minutes and then lose to a breakaway, it just takes all the wind out your sails, doesn't it?
100%.
But yeah, that's obviously.
So I'm a bit worried about that one. We've got Spurs away as well, which I'm a little bit worried about.
I mean, you still
people saying Man United away. I'm not worried at all about Man United.
I mean,
no, don't be, honestly.
You still got the likes of Brighton, Spurs. I think
our run-in is definitely the hardest. And I am worried about it. There are obviously the Man City and Spurs games I'm very worried about. But that's what we're here for. We take a game at a time. And yeah, for me, the Man City game, it's a bit annoying, and that's immediately as we come back because we're on a good run of form and we've had a bit of a break now. If that was like either just before the international break or a bit further down the line, I'd be a bit more kind of confident. But going in cold is going to be a test.
It can be hard to keep up that tempo, isn't it? Carry it over from the last game. I mean, judging by anything though, I wouldn't worry about Declan Rice or Ben or anyone else getting risked during international.
I'm hoping they all
get pulled out, aren't they?
Get pulled out left, right, centre. Yeah.
Was Saka pulled out because he was injured, or was it just he was pulled out for injured? Same as De Bruyne and Edison.
Yeah, Haaland, all those. Yeah,
it's the dark arts of football, isn't it?
I love it.
I mean, it makes sense though.
I mean, 100%.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I was watching the Overlap last night, and Gary Neville was saying that Fergie used to hate the March internationals because you're in the running and that.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you make of players pulling out from international duty? Is that something that you're for, or is it something that you're sort of not too bothered about?
I think it's for me, but I don't have anyone playing international or any meaningful international games. So for me, when I see it, I'm a bit gutted because I'm like, I want to see how this England team is going to really gel together. And I mean, I think we've got Brazil and Belgium, which are really good tests to see it's a litmus test before the Euros. We can actually see where we stand.
Yeah.
And you can only take so much from international friendlies, but I think later on down the line, we've got Bosnia and I don't know, some other team, like not really a test that's our final international before the Euros. So it would be nice to see a fully fledged England team, see what we can do. But I 100% get it. I think you're going into the most important part of the season now. And it'd be, even as a neutral fan, I want to see Man City and Arsenal come back. And I want to see a battle. I want to see the top players go head to head. And I want the team at the end of the day who wins the league to have won it on pedigree, not because another team had their best player get injured.
And players like Saka, he plays like every single minute for Arsenal and then pretty much every single minute for England as well. So if it is a friendly that he doesn't need to play, I'm not against him getting
Well,
pulled out.
can you imagine if you
Gets
know,
injured against
if
doing a
Declan
heading.
Rice gets injured
Yeah.
during Brazil game and then suddenly you're losing for the running, it just takes it out of it as what the Premier League is as a product. Maybe there needs to be some more thought into sort of where these international timings come on. But then again, you argue it should be the greatest honor to play for your country.
Yeah, well,
But
it's like the whole Ben White debate at the moment.
It's
but
I 100%. If I'm a manager of Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool,
and you also think like the money that's at stake, like Arsenal if they win the league or win the Champions League, to lose a player and then derail the season all because of a friendly, you're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds that could be lost by getting a player injured. So yeah,
100%.
It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I just think the international friendlies should be use the young kids, because if you lose, you've played a bunch of kids, who really gives one. And to be honest, like you said, you don't want another Saliba situation. You don't want someone key getting injured and then derailing the whole season. I mean, Luke, surely you mentioned then watching from the outside, like the title race going on. You must be loving the fact that you're not having to stress about what the results are in the Prem in a week. Like, you can just sit back and actually take it in for what it is. And that's not a dig, because obviously QPR aren't in the Prem, but if anything, it could be viewed as a positive thing. Do you ever look at it that way, or?
Oh, mate, I hate looking at the scorelines in the Championship, because every time I see QPR winning, it seems like every team in the bottom six is winning. It's just been. I mean, that puts my heart on the line. I mean, looking at the Premier League, I think it's just been the best season, hasn't it? I mean, last season we had a slight bit of a title race, and that probably does it a bit of a disservice, because Arsenal were charging ahead, but you always thought Man City could come across. And I think Gary Neville, we had a really good shout on the over that recently about the internationals and players putting out. I think last season a lot of people laughed at him when they said Man City will win it. Man City will win it, and he called that quite early on.
Yeah,
and you just know, didn't you? But
he's a bit of a hater, though, isn't he?
But this season, it's just been incredible. I mean, we've got just the most brilliant storylines going on, and even to some of the credit for like the FFP staff. I mean, we might not even know who's been relegated until after the season's finished, which probably isn't a good thing. But we love the storylines of the Premier League. It's just pure Barclays. We're seeing anything in the next sort of how many games? We've got 10 games left or 9 games left. That these next sort of the final run of games, we're probably going to see the top of the team sitting top of the table change 3 or 4 times. It's going to be swings and roundabouts, and I'm all here for it. It is brilliant because every game means something now.
Even I can switch just like not just the title race. You got like the race for Champions League, the 4th spot. You got Villa, Spurs, United
with English clubs doing so well in European competition as well. We could have like, I think, is it 8th or 9th place getting a European spot, which is incredible. I mean, it's so good. We got such the bottom like 6 is really tight.
Yeah.
I mean, the battle for Europa League, Champions League, it's just going to be such a phenomenal end to the season. And for me, I love it, man. I love it. I love to see it because every game means something. I'm not just watching Liverpool play Bournemouth for the sake of having something to watch, because if Liverpool don't win this, Arsenal can go to 4 points clear. Do you know what I mean? Every game has so much weight to it. And I mean, maybe that's what's been missing for the last few seasons. I mean, I probably haven't been so excited about a finish to a season since when Leicester won the league, maybe. Because, I mean, it's just been pure Barclays, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been, I mean, especially I think since the Klopp news coming out, which it added that extra spice to it, that extra story and narrative of, how many trophies he's going to win before he goes. And I want to get your thoughts, because I saw a video you did recently where you said that you think Klopp will be back in the next 5 years or so, and I actually commented on it myself. And what in particular makes you think that he would, purely because of the fact that he's explained his reasons for leaving. He's done it quite far in advance. He seems pretty dead set on going. But what about it makes you think that he could come back to the club one day?
I think for me was when he was leaving, that video he done, it never for a second made me think that he didn't want to be at Liverpool anymore. I think he, as a human being, is just exhausted, and he doesn't want to put Liverpool in a position where he can only give 50%. I think he wants to just take a break from himself, and there's lots of rumors about maybe underlying health conditions and whatnot. But if we take it as what it is, I think it's just a man who's given so much to try and compete and bring glory back to this massive establishment, that I think if whoever comes in, it doesn't work out too well. We know what football's like. We're all addicted to it. someone like Klopp, who is so heavily involved day in day out, he's not going to want to sit back for long. And if the sort of situation lays out where Liverpool brings someone in, whether that be Xabi Alonso, whether it be just another name, a De Zerbi or whoever, and it's not quite working, I can't see why, if he was offered the opportunity to come back after a break, he wouldn't take it up and go again, rebuild the club again, do what he did again.
I totally agree. I think it's one of those things where, like you said, we all love football, and it like probably dominates too much of our lives, and we're not even involved in the football. So as a manager of one of the biggest clubs in the world, you're probably like switched on 24/7, and that will take a toll. And so I think, yeah, like Luke said, it's just a case of a man that's exhausted, and I don't blame him. I think he's one of didn't he lose his mum during COVID, and obviously probably hasn't had that proper process that. So I think it's just, yeah, a case of you do need time for yourself, and you probably don't get that as a football manager.
I mean, he's at such an elite level that he knows that if he's not giving 110%,
it's detriment to the club.
Every other manager in that league is going to be doing it.
Yeah.
And maybe in 5 years' time, there's no Guardiola, there might not be an Arteta. He could come back and be the dominant force in the Premier League.
I mean, I'd love it. I would. I think I described it as like it's a breakup where anyone who's coming in afterwards, everyone goes, oh, there's plenty more. And it's like, yeah, but they're not the same. They're not, they're not the one that you fell in love with. And, it's disappointing. And I completely agree with him leaving. I understand why he's doing it. He's given me some of the happiest memories of my life. But from your perspective, where do you see us going? I know it's a bit of a broad question. I know there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes and who's going to be the new manager. But say, for example, if it's Alonso who comes in, or Ruben Amorim, or De Zerbi, or whoever, how do you see Liverpool's future going from this season onwards?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried. Well, actually, I'm not a little bit worried for Liverpool. I've got no kind of stocks in the Liverpool horse. But it'd be nice if Liverpool stuck around and Manchester City dipped off. So, but I think for me, like, not to quote Ten Hag, but era's come to an end. And like you see, like Liverpool, like a culmination of things, like Klopp leaving, Salah probably leaving, maybe Virgil van Dijk leaving, maybe Trent Terrell. So like,
no.
So I don't want to say Liverpool be worried, but like, there's got to be an underlying kind of fear of the unknown.
Yeah, I think for me, the fear comes from the fact that I think Liverpool have tried to bring in players like Naby Keita, like Oxlade-Chamberlain, even, who maybe could have sort of stepped up and been maybe the transition period. Maybe not Oxlade-Chamberlain with his injury history, but they've tried to bring in a lot of players, Minamino, players like Tsimikas even. I know he's getting roles and stuff, but I just don't see if big players leave, there's not ready-made replacements for these people. I think maybe the closest thing you've got is if Trent left, you've got Conor Bradley, who's come in and done excellently, but he's only played 8 games this season. And I think whoever comes in and takes that job, it's going to be the biggest reality check, because I think Klopp is getting the absolute most out of what is available to him. Whereas I think a manager who comes in, someone like Alonso, they're going to have to learn a whole new system. It's not like no one's going to come in and just replicate Klopp's system. It's going to be a whole new system. Probably what's going to be healthy for the club going forward, because you can't just try and bring in the great imitator and just have someone pretend to be Klopp for the next year. You're never going to go anywhere. But I think maybe, and I think Liverpool fans have already sort of tempered expectations, maybe realize you might not be in a title challenge next season. You might be lucky to get top 4, because this is now the real rebuild. We spoke about a rebuild in this summer where you lost a lot of names. You lost your Henderson, you lost your Fabinho, you lost your Bobby Firms, you lost Sadio Mane. That was the team.
Yeah.
And we saw that sort of, we thought, maybe this is a little bit of a transition season for Liverpool. Obviously, then they've done well, and then the Klopp news has come out, and now the real reset starts in the summer, doesn't it? And whoever comes in, I think it's a massive job, regardless of where they finish. They could win the league, and maybe that's even a bigger job to do. You've got a title-winning team there. How do you get anywhere near to do what Klopp's done? It's going to be the storyline of the next season for me.
Absolutely. There's so much around it that's going to affect not only how this season plays out, but the future. And from your perspective, where does Klopp rank with regards to the top 5 Premier League managers of all time? Does he make that top 5? And if so, which
100%.
position would he be in?
Oh yeah, 100%. For me, I think the top 5 just boils down is Ferguson, Guardiola, Klopp,
Mourinho.
Wenger, and Mourinho, and you could probably put them in any order.
Yeah, I
But
think
for
for
me-
me it's Pep top.
For me, I think it's Fergie top.
Ooh,
I'm going
that's
Pep,
big, that.
Fergie, Arsene Wenger, Klopp, and then Jose Mourinho.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's got to be Fergie top. I just think that era of Dominus is
Yeah, but I think Pep is doing it, and
Pep is the one to make the claim for the top spot in my list. But
Mm.
Fergie, Pep, and then I'm gonna go Mourinho. Just that Chelsea team where they could see like 10 goals all season was ridiculous. And maybe it's just because he's just such a showstopper of a manager. And so Fergie, Pep, Mourinho, Klopp, Wenger at the bottom for me.
Jeez.
But I think Wenger came and he reinvented English football, the way he was doing things. But yeah, I don't know.
The lack of Champions League is
Yeah,
killing him.
that's my Arsenal hater hat on.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it amazed me how calm you were then about the ranking of Wenger. I thought that would have been a bit of a, because of what he did to the club when he came in, I thought he might have been a bit higher in expectation with regards to the list.
No, I think I know like people's like, and like the league is stacked, isn't it, manager wise? I know like as much as I hated Mourinho growing up, as much as I hated Ferguson growing up, you know that these guys are like Hall of Famers, man, like Hall of Fame managers. These guys are. So I have no kind of like.
It's hard. It's
it's
such.
hard
I
one.
mean, you probably ask you that list again in 6 months' time, and it probably changes somewhat. Like that's just the caliber of managers we've had in the Premier League, isn't it? It's incredible.
Well, we mentioned top 5 there. It's something that I like to do on all the videos. I have 5 Arsenal players and 5 QPR players. I give the name. I want you to just give your reaction to it. It can be one word, it can be a sentence, description, however you want to do it. Some of them are good, some of them aren't so good. So you just give your honest thoughts on it. We'll start off with QPR. First thing that comes to mind, Naki Wells.
Oh, heartbroken. Yeah.
Really? How come? In what regard?
He was the lone player I fell in love with. He was the talismanic sort of League One Championship striker. I think even from his days like Bradford and Huddersfield, he just always scored against us. And he was that one player every time we were in the Championship we were linked with. And he came on loan, I think, when he was at Burnley. And we got him for like a season. We loaned him back for like half a season. And we were playing unbelievable football. And I fell in love. And when Bristol City signed him on a permanent, and it broke my heart because that was the one player I wanted back. Him and Hugo up top, mate. Different breed.
The one that got away. I like that. That's the one that got away is a perfect word. Arsenal, then we've got Bakary Sagna.
Oh, I can't say heartbroken, but there's a lot of players like Bakary Sagna that do like kind of not legendary status, but maybe just below legendary status at Arsenal, and then went to Man City. And so you could say heartbroken for a whole bunch of those players like Sami Nasri, Adi Bayor, Gael Clichy, all those guys. But I think Sagna, for me, for a while, he was like our only good right back. We've had some stinkers at right back. Maybe until Bellerin arrived, but we had, I don't know, like Carl Jenkinson and Matteo Debuchy and Emmanuel Boué. So we've had some stinkers, but Bakary Sagna before all those was just like cool, calm, collected. He was, such a guy. And then he went to Man City and ruined it all.
So what's your one word?
One word I'm going to say stable.
Stable.
I thought Judas was going to come into your mind then. I don't know why.
There's bigger Judases.
There's bigger Judases.
Yeah.
Right, QPR, we've got Stefan Mbia.
Oh, just a walking red card. Volatile. We've had like some just crazy like African CDMs. Him and Samba Diakite live in infamy. And I think he's one of the players where it just all went wrong for QPR in the Premier League era. just big money. They didn't know anything about the club. They didn't know any of the history. Didn't know what it meant to be a QPR player, what it meant to play in the Premier League. They were just happy to collect a paycheck. Yeah. One word: mercenary.
Oh.
That's a heavy word, that.
Yeah.
Arsenal, then, we've got Emmanuel Adebayor.
Whoa. Okay, I'll drop Judas immediately, I reckon. I think like I said, we've had bigger Judases. Not he might come up.
But how many have celebrated in your face?
But like, yeah, that celebration. Maybe the word is celebration, because as much as we're on the receiving end of it, that is Premier League pure Barclays Hall of Fame
love
moment.
it. Running the whole length of the pitch, sprinting.
It's sad that like if you were to do that today, you'd probably get red carded. That's how the game. That's how the game's on. Yeah. But like, yeah, I think Judas is the word. But
what a player!
Yeah, legendary, Premier League legend for just that moment. I think. Yeah.
I mean, it is historic, and then there's people throwing stuff at him when he's sliding along the pitch.
I think someone
it's up
threw
there
like a mini chair at him, and I was like, "Where have you got that from?"
So back onto the QPR then we've got Jermaine Genius.
Ooh,
shocking pundit. No, I'm joking.
Jermaine Genius is a weird one, because he actually was one of our more stable players. He played his role in the Premier League for us, played a little bit in the Championship for us, and I think, I don't know. You said stable for Sanya. Maybe I'll go with understated. It was the tail end of his career. I think he had a few pretty horrific injuries, but he was one of the ones that sort of actually gave a bit. Yeah, he was a serious player. Like he was professional about it, and
he was quite a high level player. He'd been about the block.
Yeah, exactly. And he'd done really well at Newcastle, and he had a lot of injuries, and it would have been probably a really, really exceptional career had it not been for those injuries. So maybe for me, understated.
Going back then to Arsenal, we have Kolo Touré.
Oh, another one of the. So is that free for free? Arsenal to City. Well, he was kind of that's nuts.
Yeah,
Was it Kolo who, like, on his debut training session, just snapped someone and then tumbled into Wenger?
Yeah, he's absolute nutter. The vibes are crazy with Kolo Touré. I think one of the most underrated Premier League centre backs ever. I reckon.
100%.
He doesn't get put in enough conversations. I know Sol Campbell doesn't get in enough conversations for me, but him and Sol Campbell was like one of the best centre back partnerships in the league. And I don't think he gets enough credit because of like his kind of jokey nature. But he was a proper
terrible manager,
but that's okay. We've seen better players become even worse managers. But Kolo Touré, I'd say vibes.
Vibes. I like that. I mean, Kolo Touré, he definitely falls in that bracket. Like, I remember when we played Madrid at the Bernabeu, and it was one of the best centre-back performances I've ever seen, when he was running around the pitch like prime Messi, beating players, dribbling past them. It was fantastic.
He's a nutter.
Yeah.
I love him.
I love him. I think he's great. QPR then. My knowledge of QPR is very sort of, I'm remembering a lot of the ones that I remember watching, and this one gets brought up all the time. Adel Taarabt.
Don't get Luke started on Taarabt.
Go for it.
I was going to say greatest, but I think the real word is potential. I've never, ever seen a player just have the ball glued to his feet. The things he was doing were incredible. I genuinely feel blessed to have seen a player like that at QPR. My dad grew up watching players like the recently passed Stan Bowles, and it was all pure entertainment. And Taarabt, every time he got the ball, you were off your seat, no matter if it was in your own half, because he would do something.
That is what football's about, isn't it? Like, as much as like you support like a sick team, like you go to see like excellent footballers just get you excited.
That season, even so, like 11, 12, even the season before that, we got him on loan from Spurs. He was outrageous. And that team where we had him, we had Wayne Routledge, we had Ali Fowlin, we had Clint Hill, Sean Derry. No, Heider Helgeson. Charlie Austin was the couple seasons later when we got promoted again. We had Heider Helgeson, we had Kasper Gorks, we had Paddy Kenny.
Jibril Cisse?
That was Premier League. Dark times.
Yeah. Jibril.
What a guy.
But he was just so different. And it's like maybe like the biggest regret in football, like sort of from a separate perspective, because he could have gone on to do absolutely outrageous things. People talk about Ben Arthur. Mate, he was a poor man's Tarap. Tarap, if he we got promoted and PSG were in for him, I feel like if he'd gone to PSG, he would have been up there with the best. Like, genuinely, he could have been like maybe not a Messi or Ronaldo, but maybe a Neymar. He was that good.
Streets will never forget.
Yeah, so potential.
The streets will never forget. I love that. I think that's the perfect way to sum them up. Arsenal, we've got Thomas Rosicky.
Oh, magician. I think Arsenal, like, there's a few players that you like epitomise like what it's like to play for Arsenal, our style of play, especially under Wenger. See, like, there were a few players that like Wenger signed because he was like, that player is kind of his image on the pitch. You're talking about your Mesut Ozil, your Dennis Bergkamp. Thomas Rosicky was one of them as well. Just like so unbelievably techie, read the game just different to everybody else, but read it exactly how Arsene Wenger wanted to. Santi Cazorla's another player like that. Just unbelievably techie, magician on the ball. So good. Yeah, special player. He was one of the players growing up that I was like, that's how I want to play when I'm on the pitch. Based my tech around him, I did.
QPR then. I think we've got one more each after this, and then we should be good with it. I mean, there was quite a big list of QPR ones because there was ones that I remember a lot when I was a kid, well, a teenager, and FIFA first came out, and I used to love QPR's teams. It was full of quick, like energetic players, and one that I used to love was Junior Hoylett.
Oh,
what player!
Legend. I mean, without him, we don't get the Zamora moment. Hoylett, he battles, he wins it. And it's just, oh, mate, that was the best day of my life. Wembley, you have him right in front of me. And he had a weird career because he was always like that player who probably should have played at a higher level. But there was just something, maybe just the final like 10% of his game never really got to it. But yeah, he was always dangerous for us. And even when he played against us, like when he played for Cardiff, and he was always a threat. But I've just never seen anyone with such a lack of ability in the final third. Like, just always the wrong pass.
Yeah.
Always just his shot just went wayward. But for me, that just for giving us that one Zamora moment, he's just a legend.
Yeah, he's a good player.
Arsenal then for the final one. It's a bit of a weird, well, not weird one, but I think it's one of the ones that's been spoken about a lot. But I'd love to get your thoughts on it because I think you're a very honest Arsenal fan. I think there's a lot of people who will sort of be like, oh, whatever. But Alexis Sanchez.
Oh, Alexis Sanchez. Like you were talking about, who was the one that got away for you?
Oh, Naki Wells.
Yeah, Naki Wells. Alexis Sanchez was pretty much the same, the one that got away, kind of a heartbroken, because he, was he the best player in the Premier League for like at least a season and a half? I've
never seen someone wear a tight fit.
That Puma kit was so
because he looked like he was suffocating in that, and he was just electric.
Mate, I think at that point the league was kind of your Eden Hazard, your Sergio Aguero, your Kevin De Bruyne, and we didn't really have like anyone that was that exciting. We had like a Mesut Ozil, but he's a different kind of player. But Sanchez was just a dog, like the phrase now. You got the dog in him. He literally had like the dog in him. He
would just drag Arsenal to victory.
He's just such a special player. And I think towards the end there was like an attitude problem and a kind of he would, I don't know. I see it a lot with like Bruno Fernandes. We say a lot on the pod. Like he loses the ball and then you throw your arms around, and that's not what you want in your team. No matter how good you are, you can't be that player, especially if you're the best player on the team. If you lose the ball and then start throwing your arms around and having a go at people,
everyone's watching you.
Yeah, it's so long. Like as a fan, you're just like stop being petulant, just grow up. So towards the end, it got like that. And then when you couple that with, he's potentially going to move to Man United and he's going to make them win the league. Like everybody's having Robin Van Persie Vietnam flashbacks kind of situation. And you're thinking, Sanchez is the missing piece for them. They'll get Sanchez and they're going to go win the league. Luckily, it didn't end up that way.
The piano video.
Oh, the piano video is a nightmare. But luckily, it didn't end up that way. But he was an emotional roller coaster of a player and an emotional roller coaster of a time as a fan supporting him.
So your one word?
One word, I'd say dog.
Take that how you will.
Lewis,
I know,
give you 2 Liverpool players and you give us your feelings on them? Luke, do you want to go? I've already got one in my head.
Ryan Babel.
Oh God, great tweeter. He was really, really good at tweeting. Babel, I felt so because he was a good player in a bad time. We had a lot of really good attacking players at that point. Dirk Kuyt was there. Torres was at one point. He was never quite good enough to get into the team, but he's when he went to Fulham, I thought that's a perfect move for him because he's that level of player. He's not going to score you like 15 goals a season, but he'll score you enough just to keep you in the league. The word for him, tweet. Tweet is the word.
Well, you mentioned 2 players that I was going to give you in Torres and Dirk Kuyt, but I think a good one to give you, considering the potential future, Xabi Alonso.
I mean, I think as a player, he's one of the best technical players I've ever seen. And like, it's not just from a Liverpool perspective. I think the fact that he's been able to do it for us, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, like any club he's gone to, his style of play fits everyone. He's almost in like a Pirlo sense of doesn't matter what system you put him in, he's capable of manipulating the game to how he wants it to be played. And for us, I mean, he wasn't the most mobile player. He wasn't the most brick Markovic house in the world. Like he wouldn't get into tackles all the time, but he was very, very good at what he did. And what he did was slow the game down to a pace that suited us and allow players like Gerrard and oh God, who else did we have back then? Like Schmeitzer and Michael Owen, like players like that to be able to express themselves because he did the dirty work for them in a sense.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think he's like you said, I was tweeting about Pirlo earlier. They're my favourite kind of players. The players that, like we were talking earlier, that aren't the fastest or the most athletic, which I think, I don't want to drag on too long, but like football now, it's got to a stage where like the teams aren't even filled with the most technically gifted players. They're filled with the most athletic players. You need to run more than everybody else. Whereas like back in the day, don't want to be like a nostalgia merchant, but it was the most technically gifted players, and so you got slower players like Xabi Alonso, you Pirlo's, your Artetas that were slower, but that read the game in a different way. And I think Xabi Alonso is one of those players that I love.
100%.
No, it's something that I think that is dying out a lot in the modern game. Is like everyone. There was a point, and I love Jordan Henderson. I don't agree with how he left, and I'm sort of going on my own little tangent here, but he was just a good athlete, and I think we've moved past the point of technical ability being a key factor in why players are picked. It's more sort of, can you run the bleep test? Can you run back and forth for 20 kilometers a game? And I think those kind of magical players, in a sense, are dying out. Which might be
100%. I think that's why Ozil, towards the end of his time at Arsenal, got such a hard time because he wasn't putting in the yards, and everybody was like, he's not doing the dog work. And sometimes you've got to cater for players that don't do the dog work because they are so special in other aspects of the game.
Just football is so systemic now, isn't it? Players are brought in to fill a role, and they're trained to perform that role. And you very rarely see players sort of let off the leash and allowed to sort of roam and sort of play the game how they want to do it. You rarely get players who are allowed to dictate the game, like people who set the tempo, like Pirlo, like Xabi Alonso, because the tempo is set by the system. You know, players they're grilled and trained how to make certain runs. When the ball's in this position and the opposition are in a certain formation, they've got to make this run in order to make space. It's so systemic now, and we love to see it because we get to see these amazing like sort of like chess battles between managers. But we maybe do lose a little bit of that player quality. You don't get to see those amazing mazy runs and players doing ridiculous tricks and shots from 50 yards because it's drilled out of them.
It's a very systemic approach that if you break the system, you're not doing what you're asked. And individual brilliance, I think, died off in a sense. And that's not me trying to end the episode on a bit of a
On a
negative
downer,
note.
yeah.
It's just on a downer. You know, we'll pretend that didn't get said, and we'll just Xabi Alonso is the last thing that got mentioned. But just before we sign off, guys, just want to say a massive thank you to the Board Draw Podcast for coming on today. If you haven't already, make sure you go check out the channel in the description. Make sure you go subscribe. They've just reached over 18,000, which is absolutely incredible. Make sure you go follow them on Twitter. And yeah, just make sure you go check out the podcast because it really is entertaining. If you're a fan of Championship, lower level, Premier League, all of it, it's up there with the best ones. So make sure you go and support them. Just want to thank you guys for coming on. Really, really is appreciated. Any final words before you shoot off?
Just a massive thank you for having us. We love the stuff you do. And yeah, just absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, it's nice just coming on, chatting some football. And yeah, who doesn't love talking about football?
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you for having us on,
yeah,
though.
thank
Really
you.
appreciate it, mate.
No, thank you. And once again, guys, if you are new around here, please make sure to hit like and subscribe and go check out the last expert analysis video I did with Dan Clubb of Redmen TV. That's up on this channel now. Once again, please go subscribe to Board Draw Podcast, and I will see you all in the next video or live stream.